Back in those days, my dear, friendship was something sacred. It was made of freshly brewed coffee, letters written with a fountain pen, visits without warning. Friendship wasn't a reaction or a quick message. It was sitting together on the front step to talk about life, to mend clothes, to share silences. And my friendship with her, oh, it was the kind one thinks will last until the very last breath. Before I start, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing that my story is reaching different places. She came into my life on a market day. I was still a girl then, wearing my hair in braids and a cotton dress. We bumped into each other at the fish stand. She dropped her coins, and I bent down to help. She looked at me with a smile that felt like someone I already knew. We started talking right there. The next day, she was already knocking at my door with a piece of cornmeal cake and a ribbon in her hair. From then on, we were never apart. We did everything together. We sewed our first skirts, danced at church parties, cried together when we lost our parents. It was as if one of us could feel it when the other wasn't well. Sometimes I didn't need to say a word. One glance from her and she'd know. Your heart is not at peace today, is it? When I met my husband, she was the first to know. She helped me write back to the letter he sent. She lent me her flowered dress for our first outing. And when he proposed, she stayed up all night with me, dreaming, planning, embroidering my trousseau. At the wedding, she was my bridesmaid. She looked beautiful in a blue dress that matched her eyes. When she saw me walking down the aisle, she gave me a look I've never forgotten. A look that said she was happy for me, that she was truly rooting for me. Never for a second did I imagine that look could hide pain, jealousy, or a secret. After I got married, the friendship held strong. She was almost family, spent weekends with us, helped take care of the children, kept me company when my husband traveled for work. She was my confidant. She knew everything, every fight, every reconciliation, every doubt I had as a wife, a woman, a mother. And she listened without judgment, or at least, that's what I believed. There was a time I fell ill, woman's sickness, the kind that keeps you in bed. And she took care of everything, bathed the children, cooked meals, cleaned the house, sat by my side and held my hand when the fever rose. I remember one night she looked at me and said, "If I could take your place just to see you well again, I would." And I believed her. How could I not with a friend like that? When she got engaged, I was the one who threw her bridal shower. When it ended, I was the one who held her as she cried. When she decided to go back to school, I sold some hand-embroidered linens I had made and gave her the money for the bus fare. Anything I could give, I gave. Because to me, the love between friends should be whole. Years passed. Life pulled us into different routines, but our friendship remained. We saw each other less, but we'd talk on the rotary phone, write little notes, meet at birthday parties, wakes, weddings, and every time she arrived, it felt like nothing had changed. Just looking at her reminded me of who I was when life was lighter. She was my bridge to my youth. Sometimes my heart would tighten for no reason. A strange thought, an uneasiness I couldn't explain, but I always pushed it away. Because when you love, you trust, and I loved her like a sister. Today, looking back, maybe I was naive, but back then, innocence was a form of protection too. It was easier to believe in goodness than to imagine betrayal, especially from the person we love most. She was with me through old age. We grew old together, wrinkles on the face, but memories in the heart. And I, foolish as I was, thought it was beautiful, thought we'd cross over to the other side of life together, holding hands, just like we always had. But life, my dear, life has its silences. And inside those silences, truths live, truths that take a whole lifetime to surface, truths heavier than any lie. And it was only when she was ready to go that she told me the truth she had carried in silence for decades. But that's another part of the story, and I haven't gotten there yet. 2. Back in those days, my dear, friendship was something sacred. It was made of freshly brewed coffee, letters written with a fountain pen, visits without warning. Friendship wasn't a reaction or a quick message. It was sitting together on the front step to talk about life, to mend clothes, to share silences. And my friendship with her, oh, it was the kind one thinks will last until the very last breath. She came into my life on a market day. I was still a girl then, wearing my hair in braids and a cotton dress. We bumped into each other at the fish stand. She dropped her coins, and I bent down to help. She looked at me with a smile that felt like someone I already knew. We started talking right there. The next day, she was already knocking at my door with a piece of cornmeal cake and a ribbon in her hair. From then on, we were never apart. We did everything together. We sewed our first skirts, danced at church parties, cried together when we lost our parents. It was as if one of us could feel it when the other wasn't well. Sometimes I didn't need to say a word. One glance from her and she'd know, "Your heart is not at peace today, is it?" When I met my husband, she was the first to know. She helped me write back to the letter he sent. She lent me her flowered dress for our first outing. And when he proposed, she stayed up all night with me, dreaming, planning, embroidering my trousseau. At the wedding, she was my bridesmaid. She looked beautiful in a blue dress that matched her eyes. When she saw me walking down the aisle, she gave me a look I've never forgotten. A look that said she was happy for me, that she was truly rooting for me. Never for a second did I imagine that look could hide pain, jealousy, or a secret. After I got married, the friendship held strong. She was almost family, spent weekends with us, helped take care of the children, kept me company when my husband traveled for work. She was my confidant. She knew everything, every fight, every reconciliation, every doubt I had as a wife, a woman, a mother. And she listened without judgment. Or at least, that's what I believed. There was a time I fell ill. Woman's sickness, the kind that keeps you in bed. And she took care of everything. Bathed the children, cooked meals, cleaned the house, sat by my side, and held my hand when the fever rose. I remember one night she looked at me and said, "If I could take your place just to see you well again, I would." And I believed her. How could I not with a friend like that? When she got engaged, I was the one who threw her bridal shower. When it ended, I was the one who held her as she cried. When she decided to go back to school, I sold some hand-embroidered linens I had made and gave her the money for the bus fare. Anything I could give, I gave, because to me, the love between friends should be whole. Years passed. Life pulled us into different routines, but our friendship remained. We saw each other less, but we'd talk on the rotary phone, write little notes, meet at birthday parties, wakes, weddings, and every time she arrived, it felt like nothing had changed. Just looking at her reminded me of who I was when life was lighter. She was my bridge to my youth. Sometimes my heart would tighten for no reason. A strange thought, an uneasiness I couldn't explain. But I always pushed it away. Because when you love, you trust. And I loved her like a sister. Today, looking back, maybe I was naive. But back then, innocence was a form of protection too. It was easier to believe in goodness than to imagine betrayal. Especially from the person we love most. She was with me through old age. We grew old together, wrinkles on the face but memories in the heart. And I, foolish as I was, thought it was beautiful, thought we'd cross over to the other side of life together, holding hands, just like we always had. But life, my dear, life has its silences. And inside those silences, truths live. Truths that take a whole lifetime to surface. Truths heavier than any lie. And it was only when she was ready to go that she told me the truth she had carried in silence for decades. But that's another part of the story, and I haven't gotten there yet. 3. From the very beginning, my trust in her wasn't just natural. It was deep, almost instinctive. It was as though she filled a space that not even my own sister ever did. To say I trusted her is too little. I gave myself fully to that friendship with the certainty that no harm could ever come from it. And as life placed trials before me, I always chose her as my refuge. She knew my fears. She knew my hidden longings. She knew about the nights I cried in silence, unable to understand the silence of my husband. She knew the times I questioned whether I was still beautiful, whether I was still loved. It was to her I turned when my heart ached, even when I couldn't say why. She was my mirror and my comfort, and never, never did I doubt her loyalty. There were entire afternoons we spent sitting at the kitchen table, peeling vegetables or folding laundry, just talking about life. She laughed at my stories, kept me company through pain, and shared with me the silence that comes with worry. She had a way of listening that made everything seem lighter. I'd say, "If one day you're not here anymore, I don't know what I'll do." And she'd reply, "Oh, come now. We'll leave this world together, just like we've done everything else." She wasn't just a confidant. She was present. She was concrete support. When my father passed, it was she who held me upright at the wake. When my son fell ill, she stayed with me at the hospital through the night, bringing coffee and blankets. When my mother lost her clarity of mind, She went with me to the doctor, helped care for her, shared the burden, though she had no obligation. And she knew the most vulnerable parts of me. She knew where I bled. She knew the arguments I had with my husband, the doubts I didn't dare speak aloud, not even to myself. She knew about the nights he came home late, about the looks he gave when he thought I wasn't watching. And when I hinted at any insecurity, she was the one to say, "You're seeing things where there's nothing. Men are like that, a little distant, a little clumsy. But he loves you. I see it in his eyes." And I believed her. How could I not believe someone who saw so deep inside me? She stood by me in everything. There was no decision I made without first speaking to her. When my husband lost his job, she was the one who calmed me, who helped me work out the budget, who found the solutions. When I decided to sell cakes to support the household, she was the one who made the flyers, passed them around, spoke to the neighbors. She lifted me up, reminded me who I was when I started to forget. We laughed about the simplest things. We shared recipes, childhood memories, beliefs about love. She'd say she had no luck with men, that maybe that's why she loved my family so much. She said my home was her place of peace, and I felt proud of that, proud to offer her that safe haven. Never once did it cross my mind that she could hurt me, not even as a fleeting thought, not in word, not in action. To me, she was incapable of such a thing. If life were a dark room full of voices, and I had to choose someone by voice alone, I'd choose hers with my eyes closed. I would recognize her anywhere, and perhaps that's why it hurt so much, because the fall is greater when we're high up. And I had placed her in the highest place a woman can hold in another's life, the place of chosen sisterhood, of doubtless affection, of blind trust. I opened the door to my home, to my life, to my heart, and she entered without asking. She entered as if she had always belonged, and there she stayed. She made it her dwelling. Never did I imagine that in opening that door, I was also opening a path to the quietest and deepest pain a woman can endure. Betrayal from where she least expects it. But that I would only discover many, many years later. 4. It wasn't all at once. No, it came in tiny details, scattered across the years like crooked stitches on a fine cloth. There was an odd look here, a mistimed remark there, but I always found a way to explain it away. Because when we love, we invent excuses to avoid pain. There was a day, early in my marriage, when I came home earlier than usual and found the two of them laughing in the kitchen. A carefree laugh, loud and full, like they were sharing a secret. When they saw me, they fell silent too quickly. He said she was telling an old joke. She looked away and went to fetch some coffee. It felt odd, but I shook the thought from my head. They were friends. Of course they were. She was practically family. Another time, it was a Sunday. I had a headache and stayed in the bedroom. She was in the living room, helping him sort through the photo albums. As I passed the hallway, I heard my name said in a hushed tone, and a muffled laugh. I stepped in, and they went serious, said they were talking about me, about my funny habits. And I wanted to believe them. As time passed, I noticed she knew things I didn't remember ever telling her. She knew when he got a raise, when he changed his cologne, when he had to travel. She knew before I did. She claimed he mentioned it casually, that she was just observant, and I felt forgotten inside my own home. There came a time when she started showing up too often. Every day she knocked on the door with a cake, a parcel, a message, said she felt lonely, that she felt better around us, and I thought it was sweet, because in my mind, friendship meant welcoming. But little by little, I became a guest in my own routine. She knew where the pots were, the spices, the clean towels, and he never thought it strange. And then there was the dress. One day, I left my favorite blue dress on the clothesline. It was flared, with a white lace trim on the bodice. The next day, she showed up wearing one just like it, said she bought it downtown, but I had never seen another like it. That fabric came from my aunt's countryside. I stayed silent. But that image stayed with me like thread tied around my finger. There were also silences. When he knew she was coming, he'd seem livelier, put on a clean shirt, comb his hair, and I thought it was for me. Some days he seemed lighter, and I'd think, maybe the marriage is getting better. But now I see that his lightness came from somewhere else. There was never a clear gesture. I never saw anything with my own eyes that could be pointed to. It was only a feeling, a nameless discomfort. A shadow on a sunny afternoon, But I didn't want to see, because to see would require a courage I didn't have, and maybe I preferred living in the illusion of perfect friendship over facing the abyss of betrayal. We push things forward with our chest, hoping time will fix it, but time doesn't fix lies. It only hides them, until one day, the truth decides to show itself, and when it does, it topples everything. But back then, I didn't know that. And even if I had, I don't think I would have done things any differently, because my love was whole, my trust blind, and my hope as stubborn as I was. 5. It was an ordinary afternoon, one of those with gentle warmth, the smell of fresh coffee, and children playing in the street. There was no omen, no dark cloud in the sky. It was a day like any other, the kind you live through without knowing you'll remember it for the rest of your life. And it was right there, in the heart of routine, that everything changed. She had stopped by in the morning, as she often did, brought a slice of banana pie and said she'd go by the pharmacy before coming back, left the scent of her perfume in the air and the echo of her laughter in the kitchen. I stayed finishing some embroidery in the living room, listening to the little radio, thinking about nothing and everything. My husband came home early that day, unannounced. He just appeared, face pale and eyes restless. I thought he was tired. I offered coffee. He refused. I sat beside him on the couch and asked if something had happened. He looked at me in a way he never had before, as if seeing the woman he had shared a bed with for 3 decades for the first time, and he said, "I need to tell you something." At that moment, my skin turned cold, the world went quiet, the ticking clock screamed, and I, not understanding a thing, simply said, "Speak." He hesitated, looked down, ran a hand through his hair and sighed, said he couldn't carry the lie alone any longer, that he was tired, that she had told him she was leaving town, and that before that, everything needed to be said. I didn't understand. What everything? What lie? He looked at me, his eyes red and swollen, said they had an affair, that for years they had lived a hidden love, that they had fallen in love in the early days of our marriage, that they tried to resist, but being around each other was too much, that she felt like part of our home because in some twisted way, she was. I felt the ground open beneath my feet, like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Everything spun. His words came in slow motion, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. I asked, "Are you telling me that my best friend, the woman who slept in my house, who cared for my children, who held my hand in my pain, was your mistress?" He didn't answer, just lowered his head. Then I heard the door. She had returned, sunlight catching her hair, leather purse over her shoulder, same old smile. She stopped at the door, saw me standing, crying, looked at him, then at me, stayed silent. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit her. I wanted to break everything. But I stood there, paralyzed, as if my body no longer belonged to me, as if the pain were too heavy to move. She walked slowly toward me, said, "I was going to tell you, but he wanted to speak first." And that was all. No apology, no tears, nothing. As if she were admitting to hiding a recipe, not destroying a life. I asked her to leave. She did, left without looking back. And he stayed, sitting with his face in his hands, said he loved me, that it didn't change what he felt for me, that he was weak, that he got lost, that he thought it was possible to love 2 people. I didn't answer, not that day. I just went to the bedroom, closed the door, and cried. Cried like someone who lost everything, like someone who saw her whole life turned into a lie. 6. The days that followed were the quietest of my life. It was as if the house, once full of voices, laughter, and the smell of food, had become an old photograph forgotten in the back of a drawer. No more clinking of teacups, no murmured conversations in the kitchen. There was only the creaking floor and the sound of my own heart trying to remember how it used to beat before the pain. He was still there, slept in the back room, didn't say much, didn't ask for forgiveness again, didn't try to talk. He seemed more lost than sorry. And I didn't even have the strength to scream. I spent entire days in silence, sat on the porch, watched the birds, remembered the children's birthday parties, the nights we danced in the living room. I remembered the times I trusted, the times I laughed, the times I believed. Betrayal, my dear, isn't just the act. It's the hole it leaves in your daily life. It's the spoon you pick up and remember who used it before. It's the music that plays and makes you tremble inside. It's the scent of soap in the bathroom that no longer belongs to you. Everything becomes a splinter. The neighbors noticed something had changed. Some came by with excuses, like bringing cheese bread, but their eyes peeked over the teacups. Others pretended nothing had happened. And her, she vanished, as if she never existed, as if all those years of presence, of hugs, of confidences, had been nothing but a bad dream. No one spoke her name anymore. I started finding old notes, birthday cards she had given me, little papers with recipes, memories of a friendship that, in my mind, was meant to last forever. And each one cut like a knife. I couldn't throw them away, but I couldn't keep them without pain either. The children felt it, tried to distract me. One would come read the paper with me. Another made coffee. My eldest daughter took me shopping, and I smiled, thanked them, but inside, I was rubble. Because no one prepares you to rebuild after a moral earthquake. The nights were the worst. When everything goes silent, the thoughts grow loud. And I asked myself how I didn't see it sooner, how I could be so blind, how he had the courage, how she could sleep knowing what she was doing to me. I even thought about leaving the house, going to the countryside, to my sisters, but I didn't. Something told me I needed to stay, that my story was here too, that even wounded, I couldn't give up what I had built. It took time, but one day I cooked again, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. The food brought back good memories. My mother's cookie recipe, my grandmother's fresh rice. Slowly, I began to feel like a person again, still hurt, but alive. He was still there, quiet, looked at me like someone asking for a place, and I, for now, didn't know if there was forgiveness inside me. Not yet, but I didn't send him away either, because after so long, even anger becomes tired. I began to write pieces of letters I never sent, words I never spoke aloud, but they lived inside me and needed to come out. Writing was how I kept myself from falling ill. And that was how that time passed. Silence, slow healing, small steps. There was no recipe, no rush, just me and time, and a new woman being born from within the one who had been broken. 7. It was on a chilly late afternoon, the kind where the breeze brushes softly and makes you want to cover yourself up to your eyes. I was no longer the same woman. Time had passed and taken most of the anger with it. Not all of it, but enough for me to live without clinging to pain. I was at the hospital, accompanying my brother, who had taken a fall. Nothing serious, but since he was older, they decided to keep him overnight for observation. I sat there in the chair, a shawl over my shoulders, and a book in my lap, pretending to read. Truth is, my mind was far away. I thought about life, the turns it takes, how we learn to breathe even when the chest is broken. Then the door to the room opened slowly, and there she was, thinner, her hair much grayer, but the same eyes, the same calm posture. For a second, I thought I was imagining it, but she took a step forward and said my name. "May I come in?" My first reaction was to stand. My whole body braced itself, ready to run or defend, but I did neither. I stood there, heart pounding, frozen. She came in, sat in the chair across from me, said she read about my brother in the church bulletin, that she didn't know if she should come, but something inside her said she must. We stayed silent for a while, the kind of silence that screams. She didn't cry, she didn't apologize, just looked at me and said, "I never forgot, not a single day. I know there's no forgiveness for what I did, but I needed to see you, to tell you that, despite everything, you were the best part of my life." It struck me like an arrow, not for missing her, not for love, but for the confirmation that, to the end, she knew what she destroyed. And still, she came. I answered with a trembling voice, "I don't hate you anymore, but I don't hold on to you either. Pain taught me to let go, and I let go. You no longer live in me." She nodded, looked around the room, looked out the window, said she wasn't expecting anything, that she just needed to see me once more. She stayed a few minutes in silence, then got up. Before leaving, she turned and said, "Thank you for being my friend, even though I didn't know how to be yours." And she left. I remained there. At peace? I don't know, but whole. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged to myself, and I realized that maybe, in the end, forgiveness isn't about forgetting, but simply the freedom of no longer hurting. 8. Even after everything, after the time that passed, the words spoken and the ones that never came, There were questions that insisted on living inside me, questions I carried like someone carries a brooch on their chest, invisible to the eye, but heavy as lead in the heart. Why her? Why her, of all people? Of all the women in the world, of all the possibilities, why my friend? The woman who sat at my table, who heard my secrets, who watched my children grow. Why did she cross that line? I don't know if it was desire, loneliness, pride. I will never know. And maybe not even she knew. And him? Did he not think of me? Did he not think of our story, of what we built together? So many birthdays, so many New Year's parties, so many Christmases with children in our arms, so many Sunday masses and coffee with cornbread. Was none of that enough to stop him? I wondered if at any point he thought of stopping. If there were nights when, seeing me asleep, he felt guilt. If he hesitated before leaving to meet her. If one day, seeing the tired look in my eyes, he thought of turning back. And what did she feel when she hugged me, when she held my hand? Was it all pretend? Or did she love me, in her own confused and crooked way, even as she betrayed me? Can love exist alongside betrayal? Can friendship survive lies? I thought about all this when I was alone, washing dishes or sweeping the floor. It was in those moments that the mind wandered, returned to the past, tried to fit the pieces together. But no matter how hard I tried, some pieces no longer fit. I didn't get answers. No one explained anything. He, over time, began to act as if everything could be restarted, as if the passage of days could erase the pain. And I, for a long time, pretended to believe that. For me, for the children, for peace. But the truth is that some questions were not meant to be answered. They exist to remind us that we are human, and that our soul bleeds, even when the skin is untouched. Over the years, I learned to live with what remained. The questions became silence. The silence became prayer. And sometimes, when I look to the sky and feel the wind on my face, I think that maybe, on the other side of life, all the answers are waiting. But here, on this earth, I learned that living is walking even with doubt, and that self-love is the only certainty we have when all else fails. 9. Faith, my dear, is not a cloak we wear with the same strength every day. Some days it is our foundation, other days just a thread. And in the years that followed the betrayal, my faith was just that, a thread, nearly broken. I went to Mass, but I no longer prayed as before. I sang the hymns, but my voice trembled. My eyes followed the stained glass, but my heart felt hollow. Pain distances us from God in a quiet way. We don't argue with Him. We don't shout. We just fall silent. And so I remained for a long time, silent before the altar. But God is patient, and He uses means we cannot understand. It was during a Corpus Christi procession, with people lined along the streets, that something within me stirred. I hadn't planned to go. I had come up with an excuse to stay home. But my youngest granddaughter came, bow in her hair and a determined look, and said, "Grandma, come with me. I want to show you Jesus walking in the street." So I went. We walked hand in hand on the sidewalk, decorated with colored sawdust. She skipped with joy, named the colors, pointed at the images made on the ground, and without realizing it, I began to smile. Not a polite smile, a smile from deep within, a smile of someone whose soul, though wounded, was touched. When the Blessed Sacrament passed, carried by the priest under the canopy, my eyes filled with tears, and I cried. Not out of sadness. I cried from reunion. It was as if God said, "I have been here all along. You just didn't want to look." From that moment, I returned to church with new eyes. I began to pray with my heart. I approached the tabernacle as if meeting an old friend. I didn't ask for explanations. I asked only for peace, and peace came. I began to see my story as a road with stones, but also with flowers. God didn't keep me from suffering, but He sustained me through it, and that made all the difference. I sang at church again, helped with the novenas, organized the Marian month celebrations. Slowly, that broken woman regained color, and my faith, which had nearly died, was reborn like a plant watered after a drought. Today I say with certainty, if it weren't for God, I would have been lost. Betrayal doesn't only break a marriage, it shakes what we believe about ourselves, but it was through faith that I regained my dignity. I discovered that even wounded, I was still whole in His eyes. 10. Moving forward, my dear, does not mean forgetting. It does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means remembering without hurting so much. It is waking up and choosing not to feed the sadness. It is a courageous act we repeat every day, even when our heart is still in pieces. It took me a while to understand that. For a long time, I thought moving forward was only possible if complete forgiveness came, if the pain vanished entirely. But I learned that some pains do not disappear. They settle inside us until we learn to live with them without letting them consume us. The decision to move forward came on one of those ordinary days, with nothing special. I was sitting in the garden, watching the flowers, and noticed that some had bloomed between stones. No one had planted them. No one tended to them. They simply grew, insisting on living. That touched me. If a flower could bloom among stones, then so could I. From that day on, I began to take better care of myself. I wore perfume even when I wasn't going out. I put on lipstick before serving dinner. I made time for myself to do what I enjoyed. Embroidering, listening to old music, writing letters I never sent. I started to look in the mirror and recognize the woman I was. Wounded, yes, but strong. My husband remained in the house. The relationship was no longer the same, and I did not pretend it was. We spoke with respect, but without illusion. The bond had been broken, and there was no glue in the world to mend it. Still, there was a kind of peace, the peace of someone who chose to stay out of self-love, out of respect for what we had been, for the children, for the life we had built. I no longer expected words of love from him. I only expected that he look at me with the awareness of how deeply he had hurt me. And he did look. He didn't say it, but he looked, and that was enough. I started going out more, visiting old friends, walking in the small square, attending church reading groups. I rediscovered my own voice. I relearned to laugh without guilt. I relearned to dance alone in the living room as I did when I was a girl. And with time, I began to feel the pain giving way to gratitude. Gratitude for having survived, for having faced what once seemed unbearable. Gratitude for the scars that reminded me I had fought and won. Today, when I look back, I see a woman who fell but rose again, who was betrayed but did not lose her kindness, who suffered but did not lose her faith, and who, above all, chose to live. 11. Ah, time, the one we curse when it steals the good days, but the same one that heals without us noticing. For a long time, I thought time was the enemy. I watched the years go by and thought, but why does it still hurt? But I learned that time is not a quick remedy. It is like a soft rain falling for weeks, slowly moistening the dry soil of the heart. It was time that taught me to breathe deeply before reacting, to stay silent when my chest screamed, to smile even with heavy memories in my eyes. Time, my dear, taught me to listen to myself, to my body, to my longings, to my desires. With time, I understood that some answers will never come, and that peace is not in knowing everything, but in accepting what cannot be changed. I learned that forgiveness is a process, and that it is not measured by forgetting, but by the lightness we feel when we remember. Time was kind, even when it seemed cruel. It took away illusions, but gave me discernment, took away some faces, but left others closer. And most importantly, it showed me that life is not just what they did to us, but what we choose to do with what happened. Little by little, I began to dream again, not of fairy tales, but of peaceful days. I dreamed of watching my grandchildren grow up, of planting a new rose bush, of cooking that old dessert I used to make with my mother. I dreamed of laughter on the porch and silences full of meaning, and time brought that. It brought the scent of a lively home again. It brought back my laughter. It brought new, sincere friendships. It brought forgiveness, even if silent. It brought the understanding that happiness is not living without pain, but knowing how to dance with it without losing the rhythm. Today, I look in the mirror and see wrinkles, marks of what I have lived, and in each one of them, I see a sign of time, the ally I once rejected, but who never abandoned me. 12. For a long time, my dear, I thought forgiveness was a duty, that it was like a final step, necessary to conclude pain, and I tried. God knows I tried. I prayed, asked for strength, cried in many corners of the house, but something inside me could not take that step. Then, over time, I understood that there are forgivenesses that set us free, and there are also those we free ourselves from having to give. Not because we are cruel or vengeful, but because some wounds leave marks too deep to be ignored. And that is okay. I freed myself from the obligation to forgive just to please others. I freed myself from hearing that a good Christian always forgives, as if that were a simple formula. Forgiving is not forgetting, nor returning to how things were. And not forgiving does not always mean holding a grudge. Sometimes it simply means accepting that the person no longer deserves a place inside you. I do not hate her. I do not wish her harm. But I also have no desire to welcome her, to hear her voice, to remember her gestures. What happened between us was buried, and I'm not obliged to dig up that ground again. There was a time I felt guilty about this. I thought I was small for not being able to embrace the one who betrayed me. But now I know. It is dignity. It is the right to protect myself. It is self-love. And that, my dear, no one has the right to demand we surrender. The forgiveness I did not give became a milestone, a boundary, not of bitterness, but of courage. Courage to choose myself. To understand that moving forward can also mean leaving behind what broke us. And with time, I realized that not forgiving did not make me less Christian. It made me more human. It taught me that there are different paths to peace. And sometimes, peace lies precisely in accepting that forgiveness never came, and that is okay. 13. When I received the news that she was on her deathbed, an emptiness filled me. It wasn't fear nor anger. It was a kind of unrest, as if something still needed to be said, but never would be. She left, without ever explaining herself, took with her a truth that was hers alone. And that, my dear, is a burden that cannot be shared. I could have gone to the hospital. I could have held her hand, said one last word, sought some sign of understanding. But I didn't, not for lack of courage. It was a choice. I chose to maintain the silence she herself planted between us. I chose to respect the pain she never helped me to heal. She died without confession, at least not with me. I do not know if she had time to pray, to repent, to ask forgiveness from God. I don't know if she thought of me in her final moments, if she remembered the coffee afternoons, the shared laughter, the promises made as girls. Those answers were buried with her. Some said she suffered greatly in the end, that she begged for forgiveness in haste, as one who fears judgment. Others said no, that she departed in silence, eyes lost. No one knows for sure, and I didn't want to know, because the truth I needed, the one that might have soothed my heart, that one she chose to take with her. The deepest pain is not the betrayal. It is the absence of response. It is the void left by an apology that never came. I would have wanted to hear a simple "forgive me" from her, not to absolve her, but to confirm that what I lived through was not a product of my imagination. But that acknowledgement never arrived, and over time, I had to accept that not everyone has the courage to face what they caused, that some truths die with those who carry them, and that forgiveness, when not asked for, is not the obligation of the one who suffered. She took her truth, and I remained with mine, and with it, I built my peace. It was not the peace of understanding, but the peace of acceptance, a peace that doesn't need answers to exist, that is content with silence, that blooms even without forgiveness. 14. Now, so many years later, with a calmer soul and a lighter heart, I sit in this rocking chair and look back. What remained from it all, my dear? It was not the pain, though it existed. It was not the betrayal, though it hurt deeply. What truly remained were the lessons, the changes, the woman who rose from the ashes others left behind. The words that were never spoken remained, yes, but also the wisdom of someone who learned to live with silence. Self-love remained, the one I had to rediscover after seeing my worth dismissed. The awareness remained that life does not wait, and that every day lived without healing is a day wasted. The looks of compassion remained, the friendly hands that helped me up, the prayers said for me without my knowing. The small, everyday miracles remained. A warm coffee on a cold afternoon, a flower blooming in the garden, the unexpected smile of a granddaughter. The courage to tell this story remained. Not to hide it out of shame, but to share it out of hope. Because I know that many other women, in silence, live through similar pain. And if, by hearing me, they feel they are not alone, then my story will have been worth it. Faith remained. A more mature faith, less naive. A faith of someone who has faced the hell of human emotions and still chose to believe. A faith that does not demand miracles, but finds them in simple things. And above all, what remained was the certainty that I survived, that even betrayed, abandoned, and forgotten at times, I was not defeated. Not by her, not by him, not by pain. I am here, telling my story, steady, with a voice full of memories and a heart full of life. If you liked Grandma's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can hear more stories like this and share them with other people who might be inspired by this story of overcoming. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a similar situation? How did you react? A kiss on the heart from all of you. And until the next story.